You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. Today, we've got a great segment, and we're actually calling it Reb and Rob, Reb short for Rebecca, Rob short for Bobby, on Truth and History, Reb and Rob on Truth and History. Robert, also known as Bobby Charles, he's worked in a national security and criminal justice position for more than 3 decades, including for the Reagan and Bush 41 White Houses, on the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, and is staff director and chief counsel to the U.S. House National Security. I'm always delighted to have Bobby on our show, and you'll really appreciate what he has to share. But first, I've got to point out what's happening now in our country because it's all so very real and very important. The left has been spreading blatant lies. Let me explain. We were promised unity. Joe Biden ran on that message. He promised to be a unifying leader. But he lied when he told the American people that he would unify us, because you cannot unify a country and exclude the voices of over 75 million Americans who are strongly against things like single-payer health care, for example. Now, today, the Senate narrowly confirmed Xavier Beccerra to be the Health and Human Services Secretary. He is the former California Attorney General, and this gives him a crucial role in fighting the pandemic. Now, this guy, Becerra, is strongly for single-payer health insurance, which is more government control, and he holds radical and indefensible, in my opinion, views on abortion and religious liberty. But Biden promised us someone who could handle our pandemic response. If you look at this guy and you study his background, it doesn't seem to me that he has the qualifications necessary. Biden gives us the California Attorney General, but not only did Becerra sue the Trump administration to halt common sense policies that provided relief from Obamacare, he led this massive crusade against what I call freedom of conscience. His biggest claim to fame is bullying a group of nuns into violating their sincerely held religious belief. You can read more about that if you just look online. He can pretend now that this didn't happen, but let me tell you, the Little Sisters of the Poor lived through it firsthand. These faithful nuns were sued by Becerra for refusing to provide contraception in violation of their faith. This is a pattern of targeting individuals or groups who disagree with his extreme political views. Like when he led California's effort to shutter churches during the pandemic and forced pro-life pregnancy centers to advertise abortion services. Simply put, folks, in my opinion, Becerra is not the highly qualified uniting force that Biden promised. Another big lie from the left, that they would put America first. Joe Biden said, "I'll be the president for all Americans." But the Biden administration is scrambling now in order to shelter thousands of unaccompanied minors who are crossing the southern border. And this is really important to understand. A large majority of those youth, of those children, youngsters, they're between the ages of 15 and 17 years old. These kids have missed months, perhaps years of schooling. It's estimated that their education will cost thousands of dollars a year more than for the average student because they're going to need people like linguistic experts, tutors, and probably psychological counseling. Certainly, they'll need vaccines and other support. And of course, they'll receive this all at no cost to them and at the cost to the American taxpayer. Did you know that over a third of students who don't have English skills, they never graduate? So teens who fail to get a diploma are almost doomed to poverty. Think of it also this way. these folks that are struggling speaking English and are behind, in learning, are going to demand more attention from teachers, leaving the rest of the class to make do with less. But to boot, this migration wave is hitting schools just as they are reopening after the pandemic. So students have missed an entire year of school activities. But Biden, he seems oblivious. Here is the lie. The left pays lip service to reducing economic inequality, right? We hear it all the time. We're going to reduce the economic inequality in America. But their open border policy is actually doing the exact opposite. It's fostering a permanent underclass. These people will be working for lower wages. And here's an even bigger lie. Democrats are blaming the massive surge of illegal aliens at the border on former President Donald Trump. But the facts tell a completely different story. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, he said when he was on a fact-finding mission that people on the FBI's terrorist screening database watch list had come across the border in recent months. I want you to watch this video.
You know, it's worse than a crisis. I thought I would see a crisis, but this is really a human heartbreak. We have a brand new facility to care for these children. They built it beyond capacity thinking they would never reach it. Today, they just set the anniversary that they broke capacity, more than 1,040 children, and it's only growing every day. And what that means is 120 of these border agents that are doing an extraordinary job in unbelievable times can't be on the border protecting us. And when you go up to Monument 3 and you talk to those agents, it's not just people from Mexico or Honduras or El Salvador. They're now finding people from Yemen, Iran, Turkey, people on the terrorist watch list they are catching. And they're rushing it all at once. They're catching 100 to 200 people in that one section. And what they found is it all started midnight, January 20th. There was 150 miles of border wall that's supposed to be built. 133 was done. They won't build that last 17. So it has a big gap because you took down the old wall to put the new one up. And it's becoming, when you walk into that room and you see these children's faces, unaccompanied by children, by their parents, they're 1, 3, and 5-year-olds holding hands, coming up to an agent. How many children didn't make it? Mm-hmm. How much is human trafficking being increased by what's happening? And it all started with these presidential policies.
Congressman, when you talk to the officials, the agents, do they feel, as Speaker Pelosi says, that they inherited a problem from the last administration?
Nobody believes that. The facts just do not state that. The border was getting secured and was secure. What we found now, they're telling me there's things they've never seen before, and it's growing every day. More fentanyl than they've ever seen coming across. More challenge of who's on a terrorist watch list. You know, the security and safety of Americans are the number one issue that a president should have. And these policies that he has changed had made us less safe. And what's happening is not just about these young children that, as a father, it breaks my heart to sit there and look at them and think that they risk this. We talked to one family from Honduras. We asked them how long they've been traveling. 22 days. You want to know why it was 22 days? Because 30 days ago, they heard what President Biden said, and they decided to make it.
Now, McCarthy expressed concerns about the spread of COVID from illegals coming across the border. So here we have a President Biden who is emphatic about wearing masks at parks, wearing masks outdoors, don't have too many people over. Be careful. You might not be able to celebrate 4th of July this year. We miss St. Patrick's Day, and we understand that there's a serious pandemic out there and we need to be careful. But why the heck are we opening up our borders wide open when people are coming into this country that need to be vaccinated, many of which are COVID positive people? And that's just the people that they're catching. More than 10% are actually testing positive while they're being holed up together. This is a time when the president should have kept our country closed, right? Wouldn't that have made sense to say, let me not open up the southern border just yet when we are in the middle of a pandemic? It is really just such a shame that his policies are so wrong, and they need to end now. Former White House Chief of Staff under President Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, he tweeted about the Biden border crisis. He said, when Donald Trump was president, Democrat members of Congress couldn't run to the border fast enough for photo shoots condemning Donald Trump's border security policies. But where the heck are those Democrats now? Why aren't they going down to the southern border now and taking pictures of the absolute crisis that we see there? They want to ignore it and pretend it isn't happening so that you are blind to the truth of what is really going on. You know, Donald Trump's policies protected us. It gave us good protection along the southwest border. Biden, he halted all the border wall construction. He revoked a third-party agreement with Mexico detaining refugees and asylum seekers, and he claimed claiming persecution by their country of origin. Since they do not fear Mexico, Biden said, well, if you fear persecution from your country of origin, that's okay, even if you're coming in from Mexico. Biden reinstituted Obama's catch and release program for illegal crossers. He doubled down welcoming illegal, unaccompanied minors, promising not to deport them, but to find a home for them. Biden issued guidance making the term illegal alien by federal employees impermissible, and he barred deportation for 100 days. This was an action that was reversed by a federal judge, but hasn't been entirely settled. Biden's proposed legislation is even worse. He wants to give incentives for illegal entry. He wants to give fast tracking to illegals for citizenship, fast tracking illegals to citizenship. He wants to lift the parameters in place that have been in place for decades. Why do you think the Biden administration is doing all of this? Take a guess. To get more voters, period. To get more people in this country who will vote for the extreme left ideology. They are not putting America first. It is a complete, unmitigated disaster with no end in sight. And according to so many news sources, Border Patrol has apprehended more than 75,000 people crossing the border illegally, double 1 year ago. And this is just the ones who are being caught. People are coming through that we're not seeing. The Biden administration is not for unifying all Americans. They're for securing their own party and their own agenda, plain and simple. And we know it. It's going to come back to bite them. Coming up with me in just a moment is Robert Charles, Bobby Charles. As I've said earlier, this will be the Reb and Rob Truth and History show or segment. Bobby Charles has worked in national security and criminal justice for more than 3 decades, including for the Reagan and Bush 41 White Houses and on the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, and as staff director and chief counsel to the U.S. National Security, International Affairs, and Criminal Justice Subcommittee. That was a lot right there. But to put it in plain and simple English, this is a very smart man with a tremendous amount of experience. He was unanimously confirmed by the Senate in 2003, and he served as Colin Powell's Assistant Secretary of State. So I'm very excited to have with us Bobby Charles. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more on AMAC's podcast, Better for America. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. And I'm very excited today to have Bobby Robert Charles with us today. I mentioned earlier to our listeners that Bobby Charles served as Colin Powell's Assistant Secretary of State. I want to give you folks a little bit more background into who Robert Charles is. In this role as Assistant Secretary of State, Bobby set up the U.S., Iraqi, and Afghan police training programs. He managed Plan Colombia and programs from Kosovo and Jordan to Thailand and Laos. He was a 10-year reserve naval intelligence officer, and he volunteered for active duty on 9/11, completing military service in 2009 as lieutenant commander. It's important also to know that his extensive background includes teaching government oversight and cyber law at Harvard University's Extension School. Bobby has written hundreds of articles on law, policy, and national security. He's got 2 national books, Narcotics and Terrorism, and his most recent book, Eagles and Evergreens. And even more wonderful for us is that Bobby Charles is AMAC's national spokesman. He speaks on national radio and national television. He brings truth to the American people. So I am delighted to have you with us today, Bobby. Welcome.
Rebecca, the best introduction I think I've ever had. And as you know, the capstone in my career is working as AMAC spokesperson. It lights my fire every morning, and I feel good about it every day.
Well, our members love you. They can find so much of your content on our website. And today, we're kind of launching this new segment, Bobby. You and I spoke about it. We think it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're referring to ourselves as Reb. That is what people call me, Bobby. You know it. Lots of people call me Reb. My family calls me Reb, so I love the name. And Rob, on truth and history, because we are so squarely focused on bringing the truth to AMAC members and to the American public at large. And also, we don't want to forget our history. I was speaking earlier, Bobby, on the show to our members about the terrible immigration policies that Biden supports, really encouraging unaccompanied minors to cross the border. And the left is sort of, I think, telling us a bunch of lies. They're saying it's not there. I mean, imagine, when Trump was our president, boy, did they ever run down to the border and snap pictures and try to convince us that Trump was so mean to these little, poor children coming across. Where are they now? Why aren't they running down to the southern border wall and taking pictures and teaching the American people the truth? Can you comment on that? Because I know you've got some good perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you rightly point out, history really matters, Rebecca. And we live in an age, and everyone watching this knows we live in an age where truth seems to be fungible. People, hard facts, Ronald Reagan, for whom I worked, used to say facts are stubborn things. And by that, he meant you need to form your opinions based on fact, not based on anything from prejudice to preference. You need to really think hard about what reality is. And on the border, reality is it's taking us into a very strange moment in American history. On the one hand, historically, after World War II, of course, we were a thoughtful and a very compassionate receiver of refugees from Europe. And a lot of Americans have roots in that area. But that's not what we're witnessing here today. I mean, what we're witnessing here today is last month, I think, month over month, we had 100,441 intercepts of illegal aliens. We have now roughly 4,700 coming in per day. We have caravans lining up now that Biden has invited them in, in the hundreds of thousands. This is not the way America manages either our border sanctity, or our public health and safety. I mean, what's happening, Rebecca, is we're having a dramatic uptick. I mean, DEA just released a report showing that drug traffickers are just swooning. They're just swamping the border. And please understand, and everyone needs to understand from a reality perspective, this isn't a border state problem. These people end up all over the United States, and there is an overflow right now. There was a 61% increase last month in the unaccompanied minors coming into this country. And what Biden is doing is essentially, after 3 days in CBP custody, they put them over in HHS. They're now telling FEMA that they have to hold them and then place them in American households around the country. They've barred the testing of these individuals. ICE cannot test them for COVID. A lot of them are ending up pro-COVID. They're not testing them to find out whether or not they're linked to criminal organizations. They've decided they're not going to deport people. The bottom line is we're entering a sort of a twilight zone at the southern border. And I think we need to be
right about that. And it's the schools too, Bobby. The schools I'm concerned about because, just as children are getting back into schools, they've had a hard enough year with remote learning. They've lost a lot of, it's going to be tough for kids to sort of pick up where they left off. And now we've got teachers that will be dealing with kids that really need extra attention, that may have a language barrier, that may have not really been in school for weeks, perhaps years. This is a real problem, and it's important that our members understand it and know about it, because we've got to vote the right people in office in order to fix these problems. And, do you believe, as I believe, that this is another way that the left is ensuring that they've got more people here on American soil that can vote over and over to secure their own future, their own Democrat Party, their own extreme left ideas.
Yeah, I mean, again, Rebecca, what you're really doing is you're coming back to facts. Facts are essential in understanding the reality that we confront today. And I look at what's happening with the illegal. Please understand, rule of law is only rule of law on paper. It's not rule of law in fact unless you enforce the laws. And what's happened is we've suspended a lot of the pre-existing understandings, laws, regulation, enforcement of our border security. So it's interesting. You say, does that affect, or is it intended potentially to affect the downstream electoral process? I would say absolutely yes. I will tell you that in 1997, I conducted a mass investigation as the staff director and counsel for the House Oversight Committee that managed INS at the time. And what we found is that a Democrat administration at that time, Clinton's administration, was trying to game the system. They were trying to lift the requirements for people to get into the country and then immediately link them to Democrat voting organizations. And we actually initiated criminal referrals as a result of that. This is sort of amped up. This is sort of 10 times that problem, because what they're doing is they're allowing the borders to be porous. Now, let me just flip that into a second topic, if I may, Rebecca, and maybe you were headed this way. We are confronting right now an electoral reform bill that in many ways would codify what you're describing as illegal aliens voting. By the way, Biden has issued an executive order saying that federal employees can't use the word illegal aliens. So we've got a First Amendment problem there too. But let's back up here for a minute. This H.R. 1, which now sits over in the Senate under the rubric of S1, would take illegal aliens and immediately, just de facto, it would immediately start registering them, because you would register people automatically through the DMV, and anybody who is able to be registered, and they would register people at the age of 16 in the public school system. So interestingly, both the ACLU, a very liberal group, and the Wall Street Journal have said this is an automatic Democrat registration process, this bill. I would like to call it, if I may, the electoral process from hell. I mean, what you're looking at in this bill is registering felons, banning at the federal level, pulling these constitutional prerogatives all up to the federal level, banning the use of IDs at voting booths, instant on for same day registration and voting, so you get duplication, allowing, again, DC to become a state, so you immediately get 2 Democrat senators and flip the Senate. All kinds of pieces of this. I mean, allowing out of precinct voting, allowing things like, the list is like 7 or 8 long. FEC.
Well, I've got the list here too, Bobby, and I'm glad you brought it up, because this bill H.R. 1 and its companion bill S1 in the Senate, it passed the House, right? H.R. 1, where we're waiting to see what's going to happen. Can you explain to the American people exactly, where it's at? We're in this
Yes.
middle place.
Yes. So this is the perfect time for everybody watching this to weigh in with their state legislatures to preserve our electoral process, but even more to weigh in at the federal level to tell their representatives and their senators, whether they're Republican or Democrat, that this is just bad law. This is a bill that, again, would essentially take all the problems that existed in 2020, ballot harvesting, mandatory mail-in ballots, all the things, by the way, that are outlawed in Europe, most of Europe, because they know they spur fraud, and it would make them now law. And so what we're confronting right now is that this is in the Senate, and as S1, it's waiting to get through committee and it's had, I think, a sequential referral or a concurrent referral, and then to be reported to the floor for a vote. Traditionally, for the last more than 100 years, we've had something called a cloture vote, which is a vote of 60 in order to get something substantively to the floor. We call it the legislative filibuster. And if people want to get reviewed on how it works, just go watch Jimmy Stewart's movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, because it's a great example of this. So why do we have this thing? We have this thing so that if you ever get in a 51-49, never mind a 50-50 situation, you won't be jamming things down the throats of the 50% of the country that does not buy in to that sort of radical, if it is radical, and it is in this case, radical agenda. You have to have 60 votes. So unfortunately, we're at this moment in time where Senator Sinema and Senator Joe Manchin are kind of the only two holding the line against an aggressive effort by Democrats, including Schumer, to dump this 100-year-old filibuster and immediately jam through bills like this S1. Again, I call it the electoral reform bill from hell because it generally disenfranchises average Americans, invites fraud. I'm sorry, we're supposed to not use the word fraud in combination with the word election, but this is exactly what it will invite, is election fraud. And we don't want to be there, and we don't want a packed Supreme Court. There's a lot of things we don't want, and the only way to stop those is to preserve.
Yeah, it sure is, Bobby. And I'm glad you're saying that because it is the truth. And, we've got to speak the truth and we've got to be aware of what's happening and why this is happening. For more information on HR1, to understand just how bad this bill from hell really is, go to our website. You can get a lot of information. If you're not opting in to receive our calls to action, because there's so much that people can do, we're a government by the people, for the people. So the people must speak. We must make our voices heard. We must make sure that folks in Washington understand that there's a tremendous majority of American people that are against this bill. And like you said, we're not exaggerating and we're not fear-mongering when we explain to people, again, just to highlight, it is a federal election takeover, really taking over what the states are really permitted to do, and it sort of handcuffs the states. At least it reads that way to me. It sort of micromanages their process. It's also an assault against First Amendment rights because it's policing more speech. There are just so many. And I've got a list here, Bobby, pages and pages and pages that can be found on our website. It's going to allow for, as you mentioned, mail-in ballots for any reason. It's going to automatically register 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds before they're even 18. It's going to do all kinds of things that caused the 2020 election to be a real complete mess. And instead of cleaning up our voter rolls, it's just going to add to the problem. So, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. One of the things I love about our friendship, Bobby, is whenever I speak to you and you do provide me with a lot of great insight and guidance, is that you're an optimistic man and you've got this incredible, resilient spirit, I think, and attitude of hope. So I love to leave our listeners, we're going to be wrapping up here in just a few moments, with a story of hope, because can you speak to our members, just leaving a message of hope? You've got so many wonderful stories. I want you to share some of them.
To be quite honest, Rebecca, I think we should do this at every turn, at the end of every cycle, because I am I really am an inveterate optimist. And you can say, well, optimists aren't realists. Actually, I am an optimist and a realist. And I think my life career has been blessed by all kinds of accidents. And of course, the thing to do is, when an accidental opportunity crosses your path, working in the first Reagan White House for several years, working in Bush 41, working with Colin Powell for a couple of years, you take advantage of those. You don't let them go. You step up. And I have had those same great opportunities in the military. My nutshell, let's just take this one for just a closeout for today. This is the week of St. Patrick's Day. Yesterday was St. Patrick's Day, and we have the sort of the spirit of the Gipper with us. And I will never forget, others that know him would validate this, that even in the darkest days, Ronald Reagan, and the darkest days before his White House, Ronald Reagan always maintained hope for the future and indeed put his shoulder to the wheel. And two stories come immediately to mind, short and uplifting, about St. Patrick's Day and Reagan. Of course, Reagan was a diehard, Irishman, as he often reminded Tip O'Neill. But the first story that comes to my mind is there was a day in which Reagan was talking at the White House, and he had a group assembled out in chairs. And you may recall that he and Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker of the House at the time and blocking a lot of Ronald Reagan's legislation, were both Irishmen, and they would have a dinner or so once a month. No press releases. They just kind of talk with each other about the ways of the world and probably lift a tankard of green ale. But in any event, they would spend that time together. So here we are at this White House event, and Tip O'Neill is in the front row, and it was right around St. Patrick's Day. And so Ronald Reagan said something like, Tip and I share some roots, and we have dinners now and again. every once in a while we share personal confidences, and Tip, if you don't mind, I'm going to share one of your confidences here today. Sort of, Tip O'Neill was a little bit nervous here. What's he going to say? And he said, we were having dinner the other night, and Tip revealed to me that he has a great wish, a desire to be the ambassador of the United States to Ireland. And Reagan was just a master of timing. He paused for a minute. Of course, here's Tip O'Neill, front row, blocking all his legislation. And he says, Tip, how about tomorrow? And point being, that would, of course, remove him from the House at once. The other story is the last time that Reagan took a trip abroad, he went to Ireland. And I think your family's been to Ireland.
Yes.
And he walked through the cemetery, the clan, sort of, I guess, the clan or the family history going back hundreds of years or longer, that there was the Reagan family. And he came upon a stone that said, where you are now, so too I'll be, so be content to follow me. And it was a little too much for the, actually it started out, where you are now, so once was I, where I am now, so too you'll be, so be content to follow me. Reagan laughed aloud retelling the story because he said that was too much for the wit of some Irishman who took a stone and scribbled underneath, said, to follow you, I am content. I wish I knew which way you went. And so the bottom line is Reagan always looked on the bright side. And I think we just need to understand that it is in the spirit of the American people always to look on the bright side. I'm reading a biography of George Patton right now. And no matter how hard the fighting of the Third Army was, even as they went into Bastogne, there was a bright side, a degree of humor, a degree of long view, and a great faith in the American people and in a merciful God who is always with us. And so I think we just have to remember that in dark days, that's when we're tested.
Amen. That is beautiful. That is a wonderful place to leave us at today, because it is that message of hope, and to remember that, AMAC is really the place where people ought to be. Join AMAC, get involved, tell your friends and family about AMAC. There's an organization out there that is absolutely listening to you. You can check out our website. We poll our members on a regular basis. We're fighting for you. We're not going to give up our fight. We're certainly getting a lot of work done, working on ensuring that the voice of AMAC members is heard in Washington relating to H.R. 1. There are so many things we're going to be working on this year, and I'm excited to have Bobby with me week after week, sharing the areas that we know you care very much about and what's happening, new developments, really the truth. And we should always remember history. If we forget history, the bad parts certainly repeat themselves. So we can learn a lot from history. Thank you, Bobby, so much for joining me today. And to everyone out there listening, don't forget to join or renew your AMAC membership at amac.us. And thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you back with us again next time on AMAC's podcast, Better for America.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.